Alright, you guys, get your trig identity cards out, please. We're not adding anything to it right this minute, but we will need to add to it. So we're going to develop 4 different identities, actually 6 different identities today. And those you will be adding to the card. And I'll let you know when we get to that point. Alright, so the first one that we're going to develop is the identity for sine of 2a. And we're going to use the identity sine of a plus b equals sine a cosine b plus cosine a sine b. And what we're going to do is we're going to change this b to an a so that when we add a plus a, we'll get 2a. So this will be sine of a plus a. And every time we have a b, we're going to change those to a's also. So sine a cosine a plus cosine a sine a. Alright, so now this added together becomes this. So the sine of 2a equals, now look at this. This is sine a cosine a plus cosine a sine a. Doesn't matter a times b, b times a, they're equal. So these are like terms. So 1 sine a cosine a plus 1 sine a cosine a is 2 sine a cosine a. This you need to put on the card. Alright, the next one we're going to develop is cosine of 2a. And we're going to use cosine of a plus b, which you already have on your card, and it's on page 531. It's cosine a cosine b minus sine a sine b. And you can gather from what we did in the first identity there that we're going to change this b to an a, so it'll be a plus a. So cosine of a plus a equals, every one of these b's changes to an a. So cosine a minus sine a sine a. So these added together become cosine 2a equals cosine squared of a minus sine squared of a. That you need to put on the card. Alright, now then, there are 2 other forms of cosine of 2a. And I'll let you decide if you want to put these on your card once we develop them. So we start with cosine of 2a is equal to cosine squared of a minus sine squared of a. Well, we have this identity, sine squared a plus cosine squared a equals 1. So instead of writing cosine squared here, I could write 1 minus sine squared of a. And then minus the sine squared of a that's already there. So minus sine squared of a minus sine squared of a is minus 2 sine squared of a. So another form of cosine of 2a is 1 minus 2 sine squared of a. Okay, that one you can figure if you need to write that on there, or if you'll remember just to substitute 1 minus sine squared and get that. But that's another form of cosine of 2a. Now, you can probably guess, going back up here to the top, before we plugged in for cosine squared of a, this time we're going to plug in for sine squared of a, and that would mean that we would leave the sine squared where it is, and we would take we'd subtract this from both sides, so that sine squared is 1 minus cosine squared. So up at the top, this becomes cosine of 2a equals cosine squared of a minus 1 minus cosine squared of a. And that comes from here. Okay? Now let's simplify that. Cosine of 2a equals, well, this would become a plus 1 and a plus cosine squared of a. Excuse me, a minus 1. So this would be cosine squared a plus cosine squared a is 2 cosine squared a minus 1. So there's another form you can put on your card if you want to, but you don't really have to. All right. Now then, the next one says, begin with the identities for sine of a plus b and cosine of a plus b and develop the identity for tangent of 2a.